Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our session. I know it's near the end of the conference, but I promise you are in for a treat. In case you missed it, yesterday at the very beginning of the keynote, the first new product launch announcement, new service feature launch announcement was Internal Access Analyzer as part of IAM Access Analyzer. So today, we are going to talk about that. But to introduce ourselves, my name is Jeremiah Dunham. This is Sophia Yang. I'm a software development manager in identity, and Sophia is a product manager. And really, the whole focus of our talk is using IAM Access Analyzer to understand who in your organization can access your AWS resources. So our mission is to understand who can access what. In order to do this, we are going to first scope out the landscape, which means understanding access controls at AWS. We're going to use the investigative tools that have been available to us first, which is the existing features of IAM Access Analyzer. We will then upgrade our tools to include the new internal access findings. And then finally, Sophia is going to give us some awesome demos that are going to show how to get hands-on with the new feature and all the use cases you'll be able to address. So let's first scope out the landscape. So to get familiar with what we're dealing with here, we're talking about access controls, IAM policies. And there's really two major categories of policies, and we think about different user personas that are associated with each. On the one hand, you have developers or builders, people making things. They want to apply fine-grained permissions, which come in the form of identity-based policies, resource-based policies, and permission boundaries to give their applications the access that they need, and hopefully nothing more than that. And then, of course, you have security folks who want to establish these perimeter-type controls. These are coarse-grained controls that really set like kind of the maximum boundary for the permissions that can be assigned in the environment. And ultimately, the goal is to move to least privilege over time. And we say that over time because sometimes you may scope things a little more broadly at first and then lock things down, or it could just be that the needs of your organization change over time, and that requires you to continue to scope your permissions down. As mentioned, our user personas who are involved here are security team, or say cloud security or cloud architecture team. That is a centralized group, and their goal is to manage what's happening in security at scale, set up security best practices, and really what they want is a centralized view of what's happening inside their org and to understand where things are compliant or not. And on the other hand, decentralized, you have probably a lot more of these folks, developers or builders, and their goal really is to move fast. And to be honest with you, they don't really want to think about permissions too much, any more than just getting their application to work. And so as we're going through this least privilege journey, it's going to be a collaboration between these two folks, these two groups of folks. Okay. Using our investigative tools. So IAM Access Analyzer is what we're talking about here, and our goal being to get you to least privilege. We have this mental model, which is set, verify, refine. And this is a cycle that you start out by creating the right fine-grained permissions. After the fact, then verifying, okay, let's inspect to understand who has access to what, and then let's refine any excessive permissions, which takes you back to the set phase. And we do this over and over and over again. And we understand that getting to least privilege is a journey. It's not a destination. I mean, it could be, but once you got there, then the world changes, and then you probably aren't there again, and you keep going. So with IAM Access Analyzer, we actually have tools that apply at all of these phases. In the set phase, when you're defining fine-grained permissions, there are two sets of features that you can use. The first one is IAM policy generation. And the way this works is you create a broadly permissive policy, hopefully in a test environment. Please don't do this in production. And let your application run, and what happens is a bunch of things show up in your CloudTrail logs. policy generation then looks at what shows up in CloudTrail and then creates a recommended least privilege policy that would allow that you could then go set for your application. So again, start out permissive, run it, get the recommended policy, then go replace the broadly permissive policy with that more specific one. If you already have a good handle on what the permissions for your application should be, you can just define the policy, and then you can use this other set of tools that we have, which are policy validation and custom policy checks. So policy validation, these are both this is a set of static APIs that you can just pass the policy into, and we'll return some findings, right, some results to you. And policy validation is looking for things like syntactic correctness, whether or not the policy is well formed, and whether or not it conforms to some set of best practices that we defined. Custom policy checks, on the other hand, allow you to specify, here are the things that I want to look for in my policies to make sure they don't show up. So, like, let's say you don't want STS assume role, or let's say you don't want S3 delete bucket, something like that, things that general applications shouldn't be doing, you'd put those in there. On the verify and refine side, this is where our analyzers or our findings come into play. Unused access findings and external access findings are the existing tools that we have. And like I mentioned, we did add a third thing. I'll talk about those more here in the next couple of slides. So with access analysis, we are interested in who can access what, and the who's being IAM principles, the what's being resources, and the can access, the definition, is contained in policies. On the who side, this is where Unused Access Analyzer comes into play. So we analyze credentials and principal permissions on this side to let you know what things are unused. And then on the what side is where External Access Analyzer comes into play. So again, just trying to set the scene so you get the mental model of how Access Analyzer is set up and where all the various features apply. Unused access findings specifically, and diving deeper into some of these things, unused access findings continuously monitors your unused access across your organization. And the way that it does this is when I guess before I get started on that part, how many folks are using unused access findings today? Okay, a few folks. Great, thank you. If you're not, this is really great. In fact, we like to think of this as like the Marie Kondo analyzer. It tells you all the things that you need to clean up because they do not bring joy. So you can turn this on, it will tell you, hey, this permission, this access key, this role has not been used in some period of time, and you go, great, I think I'm gonna go delete that, or I'm gonna clean it up. And when we say in some period of time, this is something you specify when you turn the analyzer on. So you say, I wanna start out with maybe a period of 360 days, right? So a year-ish. Anything hasn't been used in a year, that'll show up as a finding, and then you go, yep, I can feel fairly confident that is not being used anymore, I'll just make that go away. Okay, and then you can ratchet that down over time if you want. Along with this feature, you get a centralized view, so single dashboard that has all the findings. And like I mentioned, it's good for finding unused roles, users, credentials like access keys, as well as unused permissions within that are assigned to a given role. There's also a cool feature that we launched a little while back that for that last use case where you look at the unused permissions within a given role, we actually have a remediation recommendation that we'll make. So we'll say, hey, you're not using, let's say, S3 delete bucket. We would give you a new version of the policy that we would recommend that removes that permission. And then you can copy paste that, update, and then that finding will go away. All right, external access findings this really is the original feature that IAM Access Analyzer launched with. So what this does is it continuously monitors your resources and this is across over a dozen different resource types, looking for public and cross-account access. And this feature is special and kind of related to the new thing because it uses provable security to analyze all the access paths and basically provides a comprehensive analysis of who has external access. So that is cool. And that, when we say provable security, what we're talking about here is the secret sauce that we have in Access Analyzer, which is something called automated reasoning. So as I'm sure you're all aware, as AWS customers, you definitely use IAM. You have probably authored policies or seen policies, and you understand that the IAM policy language is very, very expressive. Has conditions, has operators, has all kinds of things. And then we have a lot of different flavors of policies, identity-based, resource-based, SCPs, RCPs, all these things. And they all come into play when we make the authorization decision. Well, as a result, understanding what those policies mean and what they're trying to do, it can be complex. So automated reasoning is the way that we model the IAM language so that we can answer questions like, does this S3 bucket permit public access? Or does Sophia have access to my bucket? Things like this. And we do that by translating the policies into math, and then we basically do a mathematical proof to say, yes, this condition does hold, or no, this condition does not hold. And you can read more about that. As you can see, we published a paper on it. That's what this picture is. And you can also read more about it by going to this link or scanning the QR code. So if we go back to the original mission, trying to understand who has access to your AWS resources, external access findings are great, but they can only answer part of the question. So the other part of the question is, well, what about access within my organization? In order to get that information, we need additional tools. And as I mentioned at the beginning, yesterday we were very excited to announce that now we have internal access findings, which is a brand new feature that is specifically targeted at your critical resources. So for a lot of things, you can generally assume that the access that has been assigned is okay. But for critical things, like say, data sources that would contain PHI, financial data, credit card information, right? All the super secure things that you want to pay very close attention to, you want to make sure that access is locked down as much as possible. And that is where internal access findings come into play. So, internal access findings allows you to understand who within you can create either an organization analyzer or an account analyzer. And when you do that, that defines the zone of trust. So if you create an organization analyzer, it will tell you, here are all the principals inside of my organization that have access to the target resource. Or if it's an account analyzer, it would be all the principals within the account that have access. This feature also uses provable security assurance. So when you get findings, you can be assured that that is all of the access and that is the only access. We run this analysis on a daily basis, and we have the ability to tell you when new access has been granted. The other cool thing with this feature is now there is a new central dashboard that gives you a resource-based view that includes both external and internal findings at the same time. This is a paid feature, and again, like I said, it's targeted at only your most critical things. So you'll want to bear that in mind and only choose those specific resources when you set this up. All right, so back to the mission, answering who can access your AWS resources and external access. Well, now we have, with internal access findings, we can get a complete picture. This might be a question that you have because, like I said, external findings was something that we launched several years ago as the original feature. And you might think, well, great. Wouldn't you have wanted to complete the story of who can access the things in my environment right away? Absolutely. However, internal access is harder. And not just a little bit, it's actually much harder. So I wanted to take a little time and discuss that with you, because it may not be obvious right away why that is the case. So I thought, okay, let me tell you, here is the actual problem that we're trying to solve. Because with internal analysis, in order to definitively tell you, Sophia has access to my RDS database, in order to make that determination, I have to not only look at the principal policy that applies to her, I might have to look at a resource policy, I might have to look at permission boundaries, SCPs, RCPs, all these other things that come into the context. So, given a collection of IAM policies, all the policies, now we have to identify all principals that have access to a given resource. So, more policies equals much harder analysis. So with external access analysis, we only had to look at the resource policies. Now we have to look at all the policies, all at once. So we have harder analysis, and because now we have to identify all the principals, we have a lot more analysis, because we have to also look at, okay, now once we have identified, well, we think maybe Sophia has access, now we have to go run for just Sophia. Like, okay, does she really have access? Yes. Okay, well, what about Bob or Mary, right? So lots of enumeration. And so you might think, okay, I get it, hard, more analysis. But I thought, it might be really helpful to come up with an analogy. So I talked to one of our scientists, one of our researchers who developed the underlying technology for this. And he's my friend and personal hero, a fellow named Lee Barnett. And I asked him to give me some insight into the scale and complexity of the analysis. And what he told me kind of blew my mind. So I thought I would share that with you. So here's what I came up with. I thought, all right, what's a really big number that we can visualize, that we can actually understand? Because you see a lot of big numbers thrown around in AWS talks, but I thought let's really bring it home with something that we all can understand. Oh, and there's an asterisk on that because, well, I do some rounding and stuff, to make it a little easier for us to talk through these things. So I started with, well, how many people are there on Earth? So already you can see rounding, right? Today, that number's around 8 billion. So I thought, well, just for the sake of easy math, let's round that up to 10 billion, and that's like 10 to the 10th, okay? That is a big number, for sure, but that is not even close to what we're talking about. So then I thought, okay, how about the number of grains of sand on the planet? That's pretty big. According to scientists, this is estimated to be 7.5 sextillion, which I didn't even know that was a number. But that rounding, that's like around 10 to the 19th. So same, big, still not even close. So then I thought, okay. Oh, right. How about the number of atoms in the universe? Also an estimate from our friend, probably astrophysicists. I don't know who thinks about these things, but somebody does. And it turns out this is around 10 to the 80th, which is cool, but also still not close. And so, okay, so we're talking about really big numbers, but you might think what all the big numbers? What's going on? Well, in order for us to generate an internal access finding, the way we do this is we have to consider huge numbers of combinations, okay? Because when you write an IAM policy, when any of us writes an IAM policy, we have a lot of options of things we can put in that policy. Huge numbers of combinations. So, basically the way you can think about what the analysis is doing is just sifting through all the atoms in the universe, looking for one that indicates that we have a positive finding, okay? Oh, right. Except this number isn't big enough. So, as it turns out, the actual number is somewhere around 10 to the 160th. So to visualize this, this is actually like we had our universe and a copy of our universe, and then we had to pick one atom from universe A and one atom from universe B, and the combination of those two things, that unique combination, that indicates a finding. So hopefully that gives you some sense of the difficulty that's involved here. So you might think to yourself, Jeremiah, that does not make any sense at all. I mean, there's not enough compute to even enumerate all of the atoms in the universe, because wait, how would that even work? No, it's not magic. It's math. And, well, and to be frank, it's math and some very, very clever algorithms so that we can try and avoid looking at most of the combinations. And by most, I mean almost all, because there's no way we can look at everything. And with that, hopefully you found that illuminating. I'm going to hand the reins over to Sophia, who's going to walk us through some awesome demos.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremiah. So now that you guys saw the theory of how we were able to build this service and do all of this enormous computation, I'm actually going to put it into practice with some live demos and complete our mission. So our mission today was to understand who can access what. And to do so, we're going to pretend that Jeremiah and I, we work at a boutique cake shop. I am the security admin, Jeremiah is a developer, and you're going to see where Jeremiah comes in later. But we're a boutique cake shop, don't have a lot of people, but for sure we've got some crown jewels in our AWS environment. And for the first, actually let me show this. For the first demo, my CISO has asked me to understand and inventory who has access to our organization's crown jewels, our super critical resources. And there's 3 in particular. There's an S3 bucket that's got a super secret recipe, DynamoDB table that contains some sensitive financial information, and then an RDS snapshot that contains customer PII data. So I'm guessing many of you guys, similar things, probably not a secret cake recipe, but you've got some resources that you really need to know and have locked down on who has access. So let's switch over to my demo computer. And where I'm going to start is in the Access Analyzer dashboard. So today, you're going to see there is an existing external access analyzer, which I hope many of you guys already have turned on. It's free. It's telling me whether any of my resources allow public access or allow access access outside of my organization. But remember, my mission here is to understand and inventory who has access within my org. So to do so, I'm going to create a new analyzer. And you'll see we have the 3 different analyzers that Jeremiah talked about. The new one is internal access, so I'm going to select the middle one. You can change the name if you want to. Check that the region is the right one, and then the zone of trust. I'm going to keep this at the organization because defining the zone of trust determines the scope of the analysis. So when I say org, that means I want Access Analyzer to go grab all of the data for all of the principals in my org. If I had chosen account, that would mean I only look at the principals within my account. So I'm going to leave it in the org. And then for resources to analyze, there's 3 different ways I can select. I can select resources by choosing which account and the resource types, or I can be very tactical and paste in specific resource ARNs. To do this at scale, I can also upload a CSV with all of those ARNs and account numbers. But I happen to know where all my resources are, so I'm going to select by account. And I'm going to select all supported resource types. And within my organization, I know that all of our crown jewels lives in an account that's called crown jewels account. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of those resources. And what this table is now showing you is that for the 6 resource types that we support today, Access Analyzer is going to grab all of that information about any existing S3 buckets, DynamoDB tables, et cetera, that are in this Crown Jewels account. And also, if any new ones get created, we're also going to be analyzing those as well. I will go ahead and create the analyzer. And what's going to happen in the background is Access Analyzer is going to go and fetch all of that information. Not only about the resources, but also about every single principal within my organization. So if there's a role with 20 policies attached to it and a permission boundary and SCPs and RCPs, we're grabbing all of that up and then doing the automated reasoning. So I'm in a boutique cake shop. We're going to pretend this is a bake show. I actually already have an analyzer pre-created. So I'm going to select Analyzer, and this is the internal Access Analyzer that I already created. So with this updated dashboard, now what you're seeing is a comprehensive view of external and internal access. So top line metrics, I've got this new number. The resource types tells me all of the different resource types being analyzed across external and internal. So that's why you'll see some additional resources that are not supported by internal access right now. And then this key resources widget is really cool because now it tells me at the resource level all of the resources that are being analyzed. Previously, if you had looked at Access Analyzer, we were giving you information about at the findings level, but now we're bundling it together and letting you know about your resources because that's really what you care about. So that, seeing the full list of resources is also available under the Resource Analysis tab. And at this table, my top 3 resources are the ones that my CISO asked me to do an inventory on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my secret cake recipe S3 bucket. It lives in the 8s account, which is the Crown Jewels account. And then here I can see the full list of all of the findings. The first one I noticed, there's an external access. I'm going to want to double check that later and make sure that our organization actually intends for somebody outside to know our secret recipe. But let me take a closer look at all of the internal access findings. So I see a bunch of roles from the 3s account. This is our kitchen account. And I'll see delivery drivers got access, the sous chefs got access, the pastry chefs got access. The delivery drivers delivering our cakes, I don't think that he should have access. So let me take a look at this finding. Indeed, he does have some read access. I'm going to want to go and remediate that later because he really doesn't need to know the secret recipe when he's delivering cakes. Let me go back, and pastry chef makes sense for her to have access, but let me double click on my sous chef and see what level of access she has. So she has read, which makes sense, but she also has write access, and I don't want her being able to modify or delete our recipe. So this is also some permissions that I'm going to go and remediate later as well. One other thing to point out is that the access, you'll see on the condition, Access Analyzer is able to pull in the condition, any condition keys that are relevant in granting access. So this is a very simple condition key. It's AWS principal account. But you can imagine if access was gated based off of source IP, or if it was gated off of principal org ID, or some other condition keys, we're able to pull that in and give you that level of information as well. One other thing to note is that sometimes people forget that same account principals get access to a resource. The way permission models work, it's either the principal permissions grant access or the resource permissions grant access. And with internal access, you get to see that really show up. So besides principals in the 3s account that get access, you also see some other roles in the same account, in the same Crown Jewels account that have access, and you can audit and make sure, is this actually intended? So this was information on my super secret S3 bucket, cake recipe. Next, I'm going to take a look at our financial data, our DynamoDB table that's got some revenue information, some customer credit card information. So let's look at all of the active findings. And first, I noticed these are all internal access, so that's good. Nobody outside should be having access to our revenue information. But let me take a look at who has access. So this Inforce account is our finance account. And I noticed that my CFO has access, which makes sense. And she has read access. So she's got describe and get item. Just the other day, she was actually telling me that she was trying to write to our DynamoDB table, and she didn't have access. So this finding shows that. It demonstrates and proves, indeed, out of all of the effective access, she really only has read access. So what we can do is actually take a closer look at the policies that she has on her principal. So she's in the Inforce account. I'm logged in on my other browser to the Inforce account. And this is the finance account. I'll look at the CFO role, and you can see the permissions that she has is DynamoDB full access. However, she also has a permissions boundary attached. And the permission boundary is what is denying that write action right there. So even though the DynamoDB table may be granting that access, we evaluate the full effective access, and that's the finding that we show. So that's the financial data, our DynamoDB table. And you can see we also have an accountant also has access. But let me take a look at my last resource, which is the customer PII snapshot. So this is used as part of our CRM tool. It's got customer PII information. So we also want to make sure, yes, this is all internal access only. And I have an app developer in our apps account that has access. So let me just check what kind of permissions he has. And I'll see that he's got some RDS read permissions, but he's also got some write permissions as well. And in particular, disable and enable HTTP endpoint. I had established a SCP on principals in that account, and I thought that I had blocked those actions for everybody except for the admin. So you'll see here, in this finding, we see that the RCP and SCPs are applied, those restriction fields are applied, which means Access Analyzer is evaluating SCPs and RCPs, but that probably means my SCP is not doing everything that I thought it was doing. So let me go into organizations. This is my management account, so I can go to the orgs console, and that the apps account lives under my workload OU. So let me see what policies are being attached to that apps account. So there are some RCPs, and then there's an SCP, and you'll see, yes, there is a limit RDS actions attached to this account, but if I look at the policy, I did not block enable and disable HTTP endpoint. So the finding is showing me I didn't restrict everything that I needed to in my SCP. This is something I'm going to go and remediate later. So that was demo number 1. I have all of these findings. I can now take this report to my CISO. But my CISO comes back with another ask and says, great, now you've done the baseline. We know who's got access to our crown jewels. Is there any way for you to refine that permission? Are any of the roles and users that have access not actually using any permissions? And can you go and remove those? Again, moving towards least privilege, right? So here's what I'm going to do next. I am back in my Access Analyzer dashboard. The top part, this is all about resources, right? So we have the external, internal access findings. I can also then create an unused access analyzer. So unused access, all about the principals. Same thing here, I can change the name if I want. I can also modify the tracking period. So this is my definition of what is unused, right? Anything that hasn't been used in 90 days means they're not using it, should be remediated. So I can change this. And then as Jeremiah said, a few months ago, we allowed you the ability to even scope down and say, I only care about these accounts, or these accounts don't need to be analyzed, or these roles and users. So I can go ahead and create this analyzer, but just like a bake show, I already have the analyzer created. So that unused access finding shows up on the bottom half of the dashboard. And my tracking period is 5 days because that was the amount of time I had to get everything set up. But for many customers, we hear 3 months, 6 months is usually the tracking period that works for them. And on the unused access dashboard, you get to see all of the different types of unused access. And also you get to see them grouped by accounts. So the example I'm going to go with here is the kitchen account. So the kitchen account, remember, they were the ones who had access to the secret cake recipe, the S3 bucket. So I want to take a look and see if there's any unused access here. And there's a way where you can filter the different findings. We see some unused permissions, unused roles, but I want to go after the heavy hitters. And that is unused credentials. So long-lived credentials. Hopefully you're not using IAM users, but if you are, if they exist in your environment and you want to trim those down, you can use unused access to find them. So I see that my sous chef actually has access keys that they have not been using. So yes, so this is something that I'm going to go and remediate. I'm going to talk to our developer, get them to confirm and get rid of this long-lived access key. So this is just one example. I can go through, there were all of the additional findings that we can go and trim down permissions, trim down other unused passwords as well. So that was demo number 2. And then next, demo number 3. Now that we've baselined everything, I want to empower our development teams to be able to know when any new access is being granted. And I'm the security admin. I work in the management delegated admin account, but these resources live in other accounts. These resources live in accounts that are managed by Jeremiah. And so I want Jeremiah to be empowered to know when new access is being granted so that he can go and remediate permissions on the bucket, permissions on his IAM roles as needed. So for this last demo, what I'm going to do is actually utilize our EventBridge integration. So EventBridge, I'll go to EventBridge, and what we're going to do is create a new rule. So I'll call this my crown jewels rule, and I want Jeremiah to be notified whenever Access Analyzer internal access findings are generated. So we'll use the pattern form. The event source is going to be an AWS service. In this case, this is Access Analyzer. And the event type is internal access findings. So you'll see there are a couple different ones, but this one in particular, what I want to do is on internal access findings. So next, I want to send these findings to SNS because I want Jeremiah to get an email. So whenever new findings are generated, I want him to get an email. But you may have different workflows. So you may want to hook up EventBridge to other services or to your own custom change management workflows. So for this one, I'm just going to use SNS topic. And for the topic, I also pre-created an SNS topic, but then I can show you guys that one. So the internal access findings SNS topic, you'll see here, the subscription is, I have it sending an email to Jeremiah Dunham. So let's go ahead and select that. And then next, we don't need to add any tags for now. And then this is the event pattern. This is a really simple one. It just says any new internal access findings generate an EventBridge event, which then sends a notification through SNS and sends Jeremiah an email. But this is super configurable. There's a lot more configurations that you can do with filtering and things of exactly what gets sent where. But this is a very simple one. And then I can go and create the rule. And so now that means my crown jewels, Jeremiah is going to get new emails whenever new findings are generated.
Yay.
All right, so we went through 3 demos, and this is just the beginning, right? Access Analyzer, with this new internal access finding, we're empowering you to know who within your organization has access to your resources, to your own organization's crown jewels. One, as we were building this, one of the things we knew customers wanted was this powerful information. It's great that it's an Access Analyzer dashboard, but I want this information where I'm working. And a lot of customers, they use third-party integrations. So we're really excited to announce that at launch, we have 5 partners that are integrated or integrating, finishing their integrations with Access Analyzer. So these are the 5 partners that are going to be ingesting internal access findings. So what this means is that you create these internal access findings in your AWS environments, and then these partners will be able to slurp up those findings, enrich them within their platforms, adding additional risk analytics, and then being able to surface insights and recommendations for you. There's one partner that I wanted to highlight because they did finish their integration, and it highlights one of the top asks that we know a lot of customers are asking. The next question after this of, great, I know that there are specific IAM roles and users that are granted access, but what about my user identities? And so Saviynt is one partner that has an integration with Identity Center. So that means they know your user identities from your IDP. And what they're able to do is make that connection of the user identity, what accounts do they have access to, what IAM roles and users they have access to, and then thread that along to then what are the critical resources in your organization that they have access to. What they're able to do, there's a new feature, if you click on that resource, is to be able to show permissions on that resource, on that critical resource. And what they do is ingest those internal access findings. So you'll see basically this category, these boxes include all of those items that are available from the internal access findings. So takeaways for today, IAM Access Analyzer, we've got a number of features, all to help you on your journey to least privilege. Today we talked about the new internal access findings. Many customers have these critical data in these 3 services, the DynamoDB, S3, RDS resources. So if you have those, turn on internal access to get that picture of who within your organization has access. We also did a quick demo of unused access. We also use unused access to trim down the permissions that your principals are not using. So if there's long-lived credentials that are not being used, definitely get rid of them. And then with external access, we launched 5.5 years ago. If you're not using external access, definitely go turn it on. It's a free feature. And external with internal together gives you that 360-degree of who within your organization and who outside of your organization has access to your most critical resources. So with that, thank you for joining us today to learn more about Access Analyzer and our new feature. And we will hang around afterwards for any questions.
Sounds good.
Thank you.